I think it's really important for people to recognize that you could do a lot of things, including changing lifestyle and nutrition in order to reduce the chance of getting cancer.
It's down to what's called the herd mentality, and this goes all the way back to the 1700s when they had the tulip mania, and people were speculating over tulips, and it drove the price up so high that people couldn't afford them anymore. It's just re-changing your programming and just focus on what you're doing, be a leader of your life, and go in your direction instead of following the herd mentality.
Today, Dr. Shadi Farhangrazi, a neuroscientist, will tell you how to reduce your risk of getting cancer. And then Tim Mann, author of No Thanks, I'll Skip the Recession, tells you money's dirtiest little secret. But up first, Dr. Shadi, great to have you here today. Dr. Shadi?
Thanks for having me today.
Well, you know, it seems like with all the things that can happen in this world, that cancer still seems to be something that does more people in than most things. What can you do to reduce your risk of getting cancer?
I think it's really important for people to recognize that you could do a lot of things, including changing lifestyle and nutrition in order to reduce chance of getting cancer. And specifically in breast cancer, this is so important. In fact, a number of studies that have come out, for example, last year there was a study that came out and was published and reported at the European conference in Barcelona, and it showed that over 1/3 of cases of breast cancer could actually be connected to nutrition and lifestyle.
Wow.
So for example, if you actually think about it, you could do things, very simple things every day. I mean, the diet is obviously one that you could have real control over it, and you could actually do things that it could reduce it. For example, one of the things I always say, and I brought this as an example today, is that...
Is it food?
Well, yes, this is walnuts and almonds, and I carry this actually in my purse every day, and the reason for that is that you could actually replace the snacks that you eat every day with healthy things that you could actually eat, and as a result
So just
of
munch
that,
on some almonds, is that what you do?
well, yes, and I think a part of that is not to replace your meals every day, because obviously you do need to eat, you know, fruits and vegetables. You need to actually reduce your intake of soy that has estrogen in it. So for example, the study that was reported in Barcelona actually talks about the fact that every woman has a chance of 1 in 8 chance of getting breast cancer, but in obese women there is a 60% higher chance of getting breast cancer. So, and that's really because the fat cells produce estrogen. So if you actually have higher number of fat cells in your body, you have higher amount of estrogen. So as a result of that, if you actually, for example, create an exercise regimen as a part of your week, you actually convert your fat cells into muscle cells. So a number of studies have shown that if you actually exercise 1.25 to 2.5 hours a week, you actually reduce your chance of getting breast cancer by 18%. So these are all significant if you actually think about it, because you could just do really small things. You could change your nutrition just a little bit, you could exercise every week, and as a result of that, you actually reduce your chance of getting cancer.
Wow. But so there is a link between estrogen and cancer?
Yes, there is, and there have been a number of studies, and as a result of that, all women have been advised to actually reduce. One is that one of them is obviously taking estrogen in the form of soy or any other.
But soy, now sometimes you hear of soy as what a replacement for dairy, right? Isn't it? People always say soy is good for you.
Well, because it's protein. It's a good source of protein, and many parts of the world actually eat soy as a source of protein. But and you know, when I talk about cancer, when I give my health talks, I always say moderation. I think the key is moderation. I think we need to move away from really having always looking for okay, when you have the disease, how do you treat it? what I'm always talking about is that what you need to do, you need to take the measures such as having a good nutrition and exercising and all of this in moderation. I always laugh when people say, well, you know, if you eat one hamburger, then suddenly you should not be, you know, talking about health. But I think the issue is that you should eat everything in moderation and eat things that are good for you. For example, walnuts and almonds that I carry in my bag all the time.
And so how many almonds should you eat a day, though? How much of this, you eat the whole bag every day, or?
Well, this is kind of interesting because, for example, I usually cut pieces of apples and I have it in my, and so I'm not going to tell you how many grams of it you should eat. What I'm actually telling people is that, for one thing, is that make sure you don't go hungry. So a lot of people, like, they skip a meal and then they go in and they always say, you know, don't shop in the supermarket when you're hungry. I always say, don't go for and eat when you're hungry. Make sure that you're always, first of all, you start with a healthy breakfast. I'm one of those people, I preach healthy breakfast all the time. So eat fruits and eat, whether you eat cereal or you eat eggs, and then during the day, just make sure that you have healthy diets during the day, but also take healthier snacks and replace unhealthy ones with healthier snacks.
And does this apply to other kinds of cancer besides breast cancer?
Yes, so what the studies have shown that basically nutrition, healthy diet and exercise really affects everything, and it does affect other types of cancer, but it also affects your brain, it affects your heart. So really what you do, whether it has to do with breast cancer for a woman or whether it has to do for other types of cancer, that does apply to, you know, healthy brain and healthy heart also.
And I know, well, I like the fact that you have even just like easy things that people could do in their everyday life when you talk about changing lifestyle.
That's right.
You know, instead of waiting until you're in the hospital or looking at chemotherapy or something, I mean, you say, what, take a walk?
Yes.
Or
So one thing I always do, and I brought this is kind of funny. When I'm sitting in the office, I'm just like many women who have very busy lifestyle. You know, we are running from, you know, in the morning, taking the kids to school, then we go to office, and we're sitting in the office for hours. We don't have the time to exercise. Then we go home and rush around trying to put a meal together. So when I'm sitting in the office, as I always do, many times I'm on the phone. So I have these weights actually in my office. So I'm sitting on the phone, holding the phone, talking, and my assistant actually laughs at me, but I'm sitting there actually using these weights. So really small things. The other thing I tell my friends.
But not when you're driving.
Not when I'm driving, definitely. Okay. So it's a lot of times I tell my friends when we are getting together for lunch, for example, I said, let's meet in a park. If you're in a place where there's no park, you know, let's meet in a mall and just walk around. And you get together with friends, and instead of sitting, let's just go for an, you know, activity. And the other thing I always say is that make exercise a part of it, make it a family affair. So for example, you know, take the whole family to a park and just run and have great time. But I think it's really important for kids to learn about nutrition and health really early in life. For example, the first lady.
So we'll pick up on that in just a second. We'll be right back. And we are back with Dr. Shadi today. Okay, so we were going to the park to have something to eat, I think.
That's right. So my point is that it's really important for us to make sure that children start early in life. You teach them about good nutrition, you teach them about exercising, you teach them about moving. So for example, the First Lady has an initiative that is called Let's Move. It basically teaches good nutrition and moving, not just sitting for kids and watching TV and on video games, but really for them to take them to the park and do their...
You know, we've become so sedentary these days that I thought The Onion had a great spoof not that long ago. It said that something like the Surgeon General came out with a study or recommended that people stand up once a day. And that was pretty
exactly.
much at the point we're at, you know?
Yes,
It's like,
and because all day we are sitting in front of our computers and we are, you know, and that has become our lifestyle, and that's what we teach our kids. And it's so important, and I always say, you know, make sure that exercise is really, you start early in life, you start with families, you know, parents taking your children, whether we go to park, or basically get them really understand how they need to eat well early in life, and also they need to move early in life.
well, and you hear what a high percentage of kids, like, you know, what a problem childhood obesity is these days, because I think so many people are either playing the video games or watching TV or whatever they're doing. But
And when we start like that as with our children, and then of course as adults, they carry that with them. So, and that's why it's so important. The other part of it is that, and it's a big part of what I talk about when I talk about health and nutrition, is that education is a big part of it. So, for example, when we actually talk about education, health and nutrition, we also talk about science education. So when we start that early enough with kids, and they really carry that through their life, and they learn how to eat, and they learn that they need to exercise at least, you know, 2 or 3 hours a week, then they become healthier adults. We become healthier adults.
well, let's hope that catches on instead of, okay, just turn off the TV, people, you know? Well, not right now, but later, you know?
And you know, it's good to actually, that's why, again, I think the moderation is the key. We need to actually move away from dealing with, you know, chronic issues. And that's why when I give my talks about cancer, I always say, I want to talk about cancer, really how to prevent it. There are a number of genetic cases of cancer, and I'm not saying that with what we talk about health and nutrition, we can prevent
so
all
how
the cases.
important do you think genetics versus, let's say, lifestyle, what does the research show about that?
So the case in, let me take the breast cancer that we started with. For example, the genetic cases are in a specific area, BRCA1 and BRCA2, which are the two cases of the genetic case of breast cancer. So that's 5%. If you actually take the overall genetic cases of cancer, that's probably about 20%. But when it comes to everything else, we know that the environment has effect on different cases of cancer, including breast cancer. But what we do know, especially after the last 2 or 3 years, and a number of reports that have come out from Europe and other places, that it's so important to actually have good nutrition. We already know that those cases, it basically reduces the cases of what we have actually seen in the reports considerably. So it's actually very important to exercise and have good nutrition.
Well, I know you were just at the conference in Europe, and since you mention it, I always think that they're a bit healthier over there with their lifestyle than we are over here, you know, or just more moderate or thinner, I think, in general, the population. But then I hear sometimes from Europeans that, well, they're catching on to their American fast food or something. So
Yes.
are they better over there or
Well,
not?
I think in some cases there are, but you know, you also, I think there are also other things to consider. For example, smoking is one factor that, you know, people should just stop smoking.
And they love to smoke in
That's
Europe.
right. That's right. And I'm not saying, but you know, I think is overall, and I think even in Europe, I think because of the recent studies, even in Europe, they're actually looking at that. The other part of what is really important, for example, for women, is self-exam. So breast self-exam is actually one of the things that all women should do. The other part of it is that, again, educated public is basically when you go to your doctor, some cases of breast cancers are not detected in mammogram. As a result of that, talk to your doctor, have a discussion with your doctor, and ask about other things. MRI is another way of really detecting some cancers that are not detectable with mammogram.
Well, there was a discussion recently about whether or not women should have mammograms routinely, or because of whether or not they were actually effective. I guess that
well,
was.
in some cases, is actually mammogram actually does detect some lumps, but in many cases, as we have seen in the past, some lumps are not detected in mammogram, and it has to be. I always say, make sure that you have a conversation with your gynecologist or with your doctor, and do self-exam. Go in and be educated about what the facts are out there, and if you have any history of breast cancer in your family, make sure that you're proactive, you're reading, you're talking to your doctor. And if you are actually, you are not getting the detection that you need with mammogram, there are other things such as ultrasound and MRI that actually detect.
First of all, how effective is self-exam? Or, you know, how Well, how good is it at catching?
It's actually, they actually say that the majority of the cases in breast cancer, women actually detect the lump themselves. So, but if you don't, and if you have a really dense breast, and if you come from a family that that you have the women have dense breasts, make sure that when you go in, you actually ask about what has been seen in the mammogram. Many mammogram screenings, they do not pick up lumps in women have dense breasts. So as a result of that, you have to actually make sure that you refer to get the MRI and
Sorry, we're
ultrasound.
almost out of time, but when you mentioned the MRI, so would women just routinely have an MRI, or isn't that a bigger deal? I mean, how would that, I mean, would you just go and say, well, I think I may have something, I should have an MRI?
Well, it actually comes down to the conversation with your doctor. So you can't just say, go and say, you know, by the way, I'm not happy with mammogram, I should get an MRI. In most cases, the doctor look at the history of cancer in your family, whether you have a history, whether you have dense breast in your family, and then with the discussion and the advice of the doctor, it's really the doctor's decision to actually refer you to get MRI.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Shadi. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
We'll be right back. And we are back. Joining me now is Tim Mann. He is author of No Thanks, I'll Skip the Recession and Discover Your Inner Strength. Great to have you back, Tim.
Great to see you again, Greg. It's always a pleasure coming here.
Yeah, and I appreciate you had me speak at your business forum a few months ago, too. So.
Yeah, that was great that you came out there and told the audience all about social media and what's happening with the Greg Mantell show, and they got a lot out of it.
Now you're back today to tell us more about the world of business here. So money's dirtiest little secrets, what's that? I'm all ears about this.
Yes, it's a hot topic because of what's happening with the economy right now. Everything that's going on, there's a lot of fear out there, a lot of people out of jobs, not working, and it's a whole mess out there that the government's trying to fix. What's the dirtiest little secrets really boils down to what's called the herd mentality, and this goes all the way back to the 1700s when they had the tulip mania, and people were speculating over tulips, and it drove the price up all so high that people couldn't afford them anymore.
Wow.
And then it went on to, we had the stock market crash from 1929, and people were speculating on that. And then we had recently in the year 2000, 1995 to 2000, we had the dot-com bubble that burst. A lot of people were speculating into stocks, and they lost a lot of money from that. And recently we had the real estate bubble, and people were investing in housing, and people couldn't even afford to be in a house or in homes, and the whole bubble burst from that. So there's this herd mentality. People follow what everyone else is doing. That's how one.
How do you get around that? Because actually I interviewed a historian a while ago, Joyce Appleby from UCLA, who wrote a book, The History of Capitalism. And one thing she said, she just felt it was kind of inevitable in capitalism, you know, that you'll have, people go off and there's this euphoria or exuberance that takes over people, and they just kind of all follow the herd, I guess, as you would say. So how do you avoid that when one of these boom times is going on? Or
it's actually just stepping back and doing something that's uncommon and not following them, and going what your plan of action is, being the leader of your life, not what everyone else is doing. That's the easiest way to simplify the way to do it, and then to get control of your emotions, because a lot of stuff we do is impulse. We do a lot of impulse buying. And society is actually set up for us to lose because of this impulse buying. With you even going to a store, you want to go in the store for just one product, you walk out with about 6 different products you just bought.
Oh, and of course they plan it that way.
Yes,
I mean,
it's
they
all
have
set
the
up.
impulse items at the register, and, which I fall for every time there's chocolate.
Even when you go to like McDonald's, they want you to supersize it up.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
They still do that. For a while I think they cut back after the documentary because they were getting a lot of flack for it.
Yes.
But they'll still try to upsize you or something if you order something. Are you sure you don't want anything else? Bigger? No, that's okay. Yeah.
So in addition to that, there's also a bad program we have as another dirty little secret that we've been brought up that way. You hear quotes like, money's the root of all evil, the love of money is the root of all evil. Money isn't everything. Money doesn't grow on trees. I was brought up this way, and my parents, I remember sitting around the dinner table with my mother and father and my brother and sister, and my mother, we lived pretty comfortably. I went to private schools, were on the country club, had nice things. And my mother says, it must be tough to live off $1 million now. And my father said, sure, I would sure like to try, give it a shot. And she was just already taking us out of the game. So we have this programming that comes from, most of it comes from modeling from our parents. And there's also the modeling also that you hear inside that rich people are greedy and they're evil. And
I was going to say it has almost like biblical kind of connotation, some of what you were saying, like money is the root of all evil or something.
Yes.
It has almost kind of like a religious kind of sound to it.
So anytime you negate something, you're really taking yourself out of it. And it's really got to be genuinely happy for people that are successful and see them as role models. For you,
so even after the financial scandal, we shouldn't think they're all a bunch of crooks.
No. This whole thing of the banks took everyone for their money. And it's just rechanging your programming and just focus on what you're doing. Be a leader of your life and go in your direction instead of following the herd mentality and get on your road of what you want to do instead of what everyone else is doing.
And just on a side note about the financial scandal, although I think there was plenty that happened on the banking side, but yet a lot of consumers went in with what do they call stated income loans, where you just went in and said I made this much money and didn't have to prove it, and so it was kind of, people did it to themselves. There was, you call that impulse buying when you get a house, but they were definitely part of the problem in a way. So
exactly, and then they think they're victims from it, and that's another dirty little secret, is not to think you're a victim or blame anyone else, that you got to take responsibility for what you did. It's a matter of having that responsibility and being strong and getting through this time that's what we're going through right now.
And now but that can be hard to do though, right? I mean, it's when you say, well, first of all, even doing the research, because what if I guess what I'm saying is that, how do you get to the truth sometimes when you may think everything is going great or it all sounds good, but then you find out that, well, they have subprime mortgages that are, not worth anything or something. And so how do you...
it's actually getting clarity. I'm glad you mentioned this. It's actually getting clarity, finding out how much you are in debt, how much you do owe, and actually having a budget, and each day taking the receipts that you spend something on and writing those down at night and having categories set up for yourself, for one for rent, one for your utilities, one for your car payments, one for groceries.
You sound like Susie Orman now, I think.
Yes.
Do you have your budget? Do you follow your budget?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I write down every day. I take the receipts I get every night, and then I write them down. So I have total clarity of what I'm actually spending. So I'm watching it as the month continues, that I don't overspend what my budget is for the month. And it's a lot easier to live this way than not knowing and just letting yourself go and say, oh, I'll just keep on spending, and you overspend, and you start getting more loans, and then you're in trouble and people are filing bankruptcy.
And that's definitely happened, and then foreclosures and everything else. Now, when you mentioned that, you say that winning the short-term game of money for long-term wealth is, what do you mean by that?
What I just mentioned is about the clarity. First, you have to have clarity. The other one is to start saving money. Have some type of savings plan, some type of goal, some type of financial plan to set yourself up for. And it's a matter, you could start small. People just need to develop habits, good habits of saving money. You can start small with just 10%. I say at least 10% of the income you're making to put into some type of savings account that's drawing interest, and you have money working for you instead of you working for money at some point in your life. The other way is the really way to build wealth, and I follow this system. I've watched and I researched millionaires and billionaires. I went to John Anderson's office up in Century City. He's a multi-billionaire on the Forbes 125, and he says that you have to delay gratification. And if you delay gratification and build systems, instead of just thinking about making money, but build systems for yourself where you have a foundation. A good system would be something like franchising. As an excellent system. There's this little company called Minchie's that's right now a little yogurt place, and they have a great branding. They have it all set up for you. Most people will fail if they go into business by themselves, but if you plug into a system or set up a system for yourself.
Sound like yogurt.
Yeah. And it's almost like a machine for yourself, and you set that foundation early enough and just let it build. And it's actually, you got to look at business as it's kind of boring. If you think it's exciting, then you lose it. And you got to know that it's going to happen slowly. If you think everything's going to happen fast, you're going to quit too early.
So that's what he means about delaying instant gratification.
Yes.
It's just
it's going to be a slow process. But once you get that system in place and get that foundation going, amazing things are going to start happening for you.
So don't start the internet company and overnight make $1 billion.
Yes, that's what we hear on TV all the time. But it's actually, it took them like 5, 10, 15 years. You see some of these people before they made millions of dollars.
Well, thank you very much, Tim Mann. Always a pleasure. His book
Greg.
is Discover Your Inner Strength. I'd also like to thank Dr. Shadi. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.